Good evening, listeners. My name is EveningWhisperTales. Tonight, I'll be telling you some scary horror stories to help you relax and fall asleep. If you enjoy this channel, I'd really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Now, let's begin our evening together. Story 1. My wife started taking night walks. She never remembered. It started small enough that I didn't notice the pattern. My wife Lauren has always been a restless sleeper. She'd get up, drink water, check the doors. Normal half-awake habits people don't remember in the morning. So when I occasionally woke at night and found her side of the bed empty, I never thought much about it. Until the door alarm chimed. We installed a soft chime on the front door after a break-in down the street months earlier. Not loud enough to wake the neighborhood, just a quick tone whenever it opened. At 2:18 a.m. one Thursday, it woke me instantly. I reached beside me, cold sheets. I assumed she went to get air, but when I stepped into the hallway, the front door stood open. The porch light glowed, and beyond it the street was quiet. She stood at the sidewalk, not walking, just standing. I called her name softly so I wouldn't scare her. She turned slowly like someone waking. From a deep thought, asked why I was outside. I told her she came out here. She frowned, genuinely confused. I was asleep. I figured sleepwalking. It runs in her family. Her brother once tried to leave a hotel room at night thinking he was late for work. We laughed it off the next morning and I disabled the chime so it wouldn't wake me again. But the next night I woke anyway. Something about absence has a weight you feel even asleep. The clock read 2:18 again. Her side of the bed empty. I got up faster this time and looked through the window before opening the door. She wasn't on the sidewalk. She was halfway down the street, walking steadily under the dim streetlights. No shoes, no jacket, just moving with quiet purpose. I followed, calling softly at first, then louder. She didn't respond. She stopped at the corner, not hesitating, just arriving somewhere she intended to be. When I reached her, she looked at me with mild annoyance like I'd interrupted a conversation. "What?" she asked. I asked where she was going. She hesitated, then looked around like she'd never seen the street before. "I thought you woke me." She had no memory, again. That's when I started locking the bedroom door. The following night, the chime rang anyway, from downstairs. The sound was unmistakable. Front door, open. I was awake before I realized I'd been asleep, already standing in the hallway. The bedroom door was still locked behind me exactly the way I'd left it, which meant she hadn't passed through it. My chest tightened as I walked downstairs. The house felt colder than usual, that early morning cold where the heating system pauses before cycling again. The living room lamp I'd turned off earlier glowed dimly. The front door stood open, but Lauren wasn't in the doorway. I stepped onto the porch and looked toward the street. Nothing. For a moment I thought I'd imagined the chime, until I noticed the back door was slightly ajar, the kitchen curtain moving gently inward. She'd gone through the other side of the house. I followed across the yard barefoot, dew soaking into my socks, and reached the fence that bordered the alley. The gate hung open. That gate never stayed open. The latch sticks and needs a hard pull to release. I'd fixed it myself weeks ago. Beyond the alley, about halfway down, she stood again, facing the dark line of trees behind the houses, not moving. I slowed before calling her name this time. Something about the way she stood made me hesitate. Arms relaxed at her sides, shoulders loose, not like someone lost or wandering, like someone waiting their turn. I approached carefully. "Lauren," She answered immediately this time. "You're late." I stopped. "Late for what?" She didn't turn around. "You said you'd come yesterday." My stomach tightened. I didn't. She seemed to listen to something I couldn't hear. A long pause followed. Then she turned to me slowly, confusion replacing whatever expression she'd had before. "Why are we outside?" I guided her back inside without explaining. She slept normally afterward, breathing steady within minutes, while I lay awake watching the ceiling until sunrise. In the morning, she remembered none of it, but she did ask one question while pouring coffee. "Did you move the chair in the backyard?" I hadn't. We rarely used the yard at all. But when I checked, one of the plastic patio chairs now sat facing the fence, positioned toward the trees like someone had dragged it there to sit and watch. That night I stayed awake intentionally. At 2:17 a.m., Lauren sat up in bed, not groggy, immediate. She stood, unlocked the bedroom door, and walked out without looking at me. I followed silently this time. She didn't go to the front door. She went to the hallway mirror and stopped. For several seconds she stared at her reflection, unmoving. Then she spoke quietly to it. "I brought him this time." My reflection stood behind her, but hers wasn't looking at me. I stayed completely still behind her. The hallway light was off, only the faint glow from the kitchen reaching the mirror, but it was enough to see her face clearly. Her eyes were open, not the unfocused look of someone sleepwalking. She looked attentive, like she was waiting for an answer, but she wasn't looking at me. Her reflection stared slightly to the side of where I stood, a position just over my shoulder. I turned instinctively. Nothing behind me, just the dark hallway and the closed bedroom door. In the mirror, though, she nodded once. "Okay," she said softly. "He's here now." I stepped forward and put my hand on her shoulder. She flinched, not startled, but confused, like I'd interrupted a conversation she was trying to hear. "Lauren," I said, keeping my voice low. "Come back to bed." She blinked several times and focused on me properly for the first time. "Why are you awake?" I asked what she'd just said. She frowned. "I didn't say anything." I led her back to bed again, but neither of us slept much after that. She tossed occasionally, murmuring in fragments I couldn't quite understand. Once I heard clearly, "Not yet." The next morning she felt fine, rested even, which made it worse somehow. I checked the mirror again in daylight, expecting to see something odd about its angle or placement. Nothing unusual, except a faint smudge near shoulder height, not fingerprints, more like a clean streak across the dust, vertical, the way someone might drag their hand slowly across the glass from the inside. I cleaned it. That night I stayed in the hallway before 2 a.m. At exactly 2:18 she opened the bedroom door, but she didn't seem surprised to see me waiting. "You came early today," she said calmly, still not fully awake. "Where are you going?" I asked. She pointed toward the back door. "They don't like when you miss days." I felt the same tightness in my chest as before. "Who doesn't?" She hesitated like she was trying to remember instructions. Then she whispered, "The people outside the fence." I followed again. This time when she reached the yard, she didn't stop at the chair. She kept walking to the fence gate and held it open, waiting for me. The trees beyond looked normal, backyard woods between neighborhoods, but the darkness inside them felt thicker than the rest of the night. She stepped just past the fence line. I grabbed her arm. She looked at me, truly looked, and panic flashed across her face for the first time since this started. "You weren't supposed to come yet," she said urgently. From somewhere deeper in the trees came the faint sound of another gate opening. Not ours, further in. I pulled her back through the gate, harder than I meant to, enough that she stumbled against me. But the moment her feet crossed onto the grass of our yard again, her expression changed. The urgency drained out of her face and she looked around in confusion, like she'd just woken somewhere unfamiliar. "Why are we outside?" she asked again, same tone as the first night. I didn't answer right away, because behind us, beyond the fence, I heard slow footsteps stop exactly where she'd been standing seconds earlier. Not approaching, just arriving. I shut the gate and slid the latch into place. It clicked louder than usual in the quiet. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Nothing climbed the fence. Nothing rattled the metal. But I felt the presence on the other side, the way you feel someone standing too close behind you in a line. A pressure without contact. I walked her inside, locked both doors, and this time I moved the chair away from the fence before coming back in. I didn't sleep at all afterward. In the morning, she had dirt on the bottom of her feet she couldn't explain. That afternoon, I checked the property survey papers from when we bought the house. The backyard backed into a narrow strip of unused land the city owned. Just drainage and trees. And beyond that, another neighborhood separated by a second fence line. 2 fences. I hadn't noticed that before. That night, I waited in the living room with the lights off. At 2:18, the bedroom door opened upstairs. Her footsteps came down slowly, steady, familiar now. She didn't react to me sitting there. She just walked to the back door and unlocked it. I spoke before she reached the handle. "What happens if you don't go?" She stopped. For a moment I thought she'd wake fully, but instead she answered in a distant voice, repeating something she'd been told. "They come closer." A soft metallic sound came from outside. Not our gate. The second fence. I opened the curtain slightly. Between the trees I could see it. The faint outline of the far fence shifting inward, bowing as if weight leaned against it from the other side. She reached for the door again. I locked it first. Her hand rested on the knob, unmoving. Behind us, from the hallway mirror, came a quiet tap. One knuckle against glass. We both turned. Her reflection stood still. Mine did not. In the mirror, I was still facing the back door. For a second, I didn't breathe. Lauren was beside me. I could feel her shoulder touching my arm. But in the mirror, my body still stood turned toward the back door. Hand raised like I hadn't reacted at all. Then the reflection slowly lowered its arm. I hadn't moved. Lauren's grip tightened around the knob. "You didn't lock it yesterday," she said softly, still in that distant tone. "They said it was easier when you didn't watch." I stepped away from the mirror, pulling her with me, but the reflection didn't follow immediately. It stayed a half-second behind, then caught up, matching us again. Outside, metal creaked, not loud, a gradual bend, the way a fence sounds when pressure builds over time. I forced myself not to look through the window. Something about the reflection lag told me attention mattered, like turning away broke whatever alignment they needed. "Come upstairs," I said quietly. She resisted at first, listening to something past the door. Then she blinked, confused again, and followed. I closed the bedroom door and wedged a chair under the handle. We sat on the bed without speaking. The creaking downstairs continued for several minutes, then stopped. No footsteps, no knocks, just silence thick enough to notice. We waited until sunrise before moving again. I checked the yard first thing. Our fence stood intact, latch still secured, but the second fence beyond the trees leaned inward slightly, its top rail bent toward our property as if something had leaned there for hours. I called the city maintenance line. They said no one else reported damage along that strip. That evening, I covered the hallway mirror with a blanket. At 2:18, the chime rang anyway. Not the door. The sound came from beneath the blanket, muffled. Lauren sat up in bed. "They don't need the door now," she whispered. From downstairs came a slow, deliberate footstep. Inside the house, the sound came again, a single step on hardwood, unmistakable in the silence of early morning. Not the house settling, not pipes, not fabric shifting, weight transferring from one foot to another. Lauren gripped my arm. For the first time since this started, she was fully awake before speaking. "That's new," she whispered. We both listened. Another step, then another, moving slowly across the living room below us. I had locked every door and window. I checked them myself before bed, twice. The bedroom chair pressed against the handle didn't move, but the knob lowered gently anyway, stopping against the wood of the chair and rising back up with a soft click. Something tested it, then retreated. The footsteps crossed the hallway beneath us toward the covered mirror. The blanket rustled faintly as if brushed aside. We heard nothing for several seconds. Then from downstairs, in my voice, came a calm sentence. "It's fine. He stayed upstairs tonight." Lauren stared at me. I hadn't spoken. The voice repeated, slightly closer to the staircase. "You don't have to wait outside anymore." A step landed on the first stair. I pushed the chair tighter against the door instinctively, though it hadn't opened before. The steps continued upward slowly, not sneaking, just patient. Halfway up they stopped. Silence stretched long enough that I thought maybe it had left. Then the hallway mirror uncovered itself, the blanket sliding off onto the floor, though we hadn't heard anyone enter the hall. The bedroom door rattled once as if something leaned lightly against it. Lauren whispered, "They found another way." The handle lowered again, pressing firmly into the chair this time. Downstairs, the back door opened on its own. We heard the chime clearly. And outside came multiple faint footfalls crossing the yard toward the house. Not rushing, arriving. I realized then the walks hadn't been for Lauren. They'd been for me. Every night she'd been meeting them at the fence so they wouldn't come inside. And tonight, she hadn't. The steps on the stairs didn't continue upward. They waited right outside the bedroom door, close enough that the faint pressure of presence pushed cool air under the gap at the bottom. Lauren's breathing grew shallow beside me, but she didn't move toward the door this time. She stayed still, like she understood something I didn't yet. From downstairs, the back door remained open. The night air flowed through the hallway and up the stairwell, carrying the faint rustle of movement in the yard. More than one set of feet crossing grass. No knocking, no forcing entry. They were being let in. The handle pressed down harder against the chair once, it twice, then released. Instead of trying again, the steps turned away from the bedroom and descended slowly back to the first floor. A few seconds later, we heard them move through the living room toward the back of the house. Lauren exhaled shakily. "They're checking." "For what?" I whispered. She didn't answer right away. "For you to come down," she finally said. We stayed in the room until the sky outside began to lighten. The house quieted again gradually. Not sudden silence, but the fading of attention. When I finally moved the chair and opened the bedroom door, The hallway was empty. Downstairs, the mirror was uncovered and spotless. The back door stood open wide. I stepped onto the porch and looked toward the fence. Nothing in the yard, but the second fence beyond the trees now stood perfectly straight again, no bend at all, as if the pressure from the night had been released. Lauren came downstairs slowly, holding the railing. She looked exhausted in a way she never had before, like she hadn't slept for days. "They were waiting for you to notice," she said quietly. "Notice what?" She looked toward the hallway mirror. "You've been walking with me every night." I felt a chill run up my back. "I followed you twice," I said. "Not every..." She shook her head. "No, you never wake up when you do." I checked my phone history, step counter logs. Every night at 2:18 a.m., movement recorded. Even the nights I stayed in bed. The backyard camera we'd installed months ago had recordings I'd never opened because nothing ever triggered alerts. I played the previous night's footage. The back door opened. Lauren stepped outside. A second figure followed her, same height as me, same build, walking beside her to the fence while I slept upstairs. In the final clip, as they reached the gate, the figure turned toward the camera. My face, and behind it, shapes gathered in the dark beyond the trees, stopping once we reached them. I closed the footage. We never heard footsteps inside again after that night, but sometimes, just before sleep, I feel the sensation of standing outside in cool grass, waiting for someone to arrive so they don't have to come closer. Story 2. I drive a night taxi and one passenger never gets out. I switched to night driving because the city is easier after midnight. Less traffic, quieter conversations, people too tired to argue about routes. Most passengers either want silence or someone to listen while they unwind after long shifts. After a few months, you start recognizing regulars, bartenders, nurses, airport workers, and the job becomes predictable. That's why I noticed him immediately. He didn't wave me down. He was just standing at a corner where nobody ever waits for rides. A residential block far from bars or bus stops. At exactly 1:40 a.m., the streetlights flickered slightly in the cold, and he stepped forward calmly as I slowed, already reaching for the rear door handle like he knew I'd stop. He got in and closed the door gently. No smell of alcohol, no rush, just quiet. "Where to?" I asked. He gave an address across town in an older neighborhood. His voice was clear but distant, like someone talking after a long day. We drove in silence most of the way. I glanced at him in the mirror once. Late 30s maybe, wearing a plain jacket, but something about his reflection looked slightly darker than the back seat should have been. I assumed the dome light angle was off. When we reached the address, I parked. He didn't move. I told him the fare. He looked toward the house outside the window instead of me. Porch light off, curtains closed. "I'll wait," he said. "For what?" I asked. He didn't answer. After about 30 seconds, he opened the door and stepped out without paying, walking up the driveway. I started to call after him, then stopped. Sometimes people grab wallets inside. I watched through the windshield. He reached the porch, raised his hand to knock, and the porch light turned on before he touched the door. He froze there a moment, then walked back to the cars and got in again. "Drive," he said calmly. I asked if everything was okay. "Yes," he said. "They're not ready tonight." I didn't ask more. He gave me another address, paid in exact cash, and left normally that time. Weird, but night shifts are full of weird. The next night at 1:40 a.m., he was waiting at the same corner again. I almost didn't stop the second night, not because of fear, more because I thought it would be awkward, but he was already stepping toward the curb before I fully slowed. Same calm expression, same quiet posture, like he'd been standing there a long time before I arrived. He got in, closed the door gently, and gave me the same address. I didn't mention the night before. We drove the same route automatically. Halfway there, I noticed the temperature display on my dashboard slowly dropping, though the heater was still blowing warm air. My breath didn't fog, the windows didn't frost. Only the number changed, decreasing 1 degree every minute until it settled several degrees lower than outside air should have been. He stared ahead the whole time. We pulled up to the house again, dark, still. He didn't open the door this time. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, looking past me toward the front yard. "Someone came yesterday," he said quietly. I didn't know what to say, so I waited. After a moment, he nodded to himself, opened the door, and stepped out again. I watched carefully this time. He walked to the porch slower than before, like he expected something to interrupt him. His hand lifted toward the door, and just before it reached the wood, a shadow crossed the curtains inside. The porch light turned on immediately. He stopped again, stood there longer than the first night, then turned and returned to the car, closing the door softly behind him. "They still live there," he said, almost relieved. "Who?" I asked. "My family." He gave a different destination again, paid, and left. I checked my ride history after dropping him off. The first night's trip had saved normally. The second hadn't recorded at all. No pickup location, no fare. But the cash sat in my cup holder. I thought it was a glitch until the third night, 1:40 a.m., when dispatch asked why I kept marking myself unavailable in the same residential block for 20 minutes every night. I hadn't, yet my GPS logs showed my car parked at that corner before I ever arrived, and standing on the sidewalk in the time-stamped street camera image they sent me was the man already beside my car before it pulled up. The fourth night, I parked a block away at 1:35 a.m. I wanted to see if he'd appear only when I drove past, some pattern tied to the car, but the corner was already occupied when I turned onto the street. He stood beside the curb, facing the direction I normally approached from, not the direction I came from now. I slowed and pulled up anyway. He opened the door before I spoke and sat down like nothing had changed. For the first time, I didn't start driving immediately. "I got a message from dispatch," I told him carefully. "They said my car's been stopping here before I arrive." He listened politely, hands folded in his lap. Then he said, "Yes." I waited for explanation. He looked out the window toward the empty intersection. "Sometimes you're early." That answer sat wrong in my head. I asked where he needed to go tonight. He gave the same house, address again. As I drove, I noticed the clock on my dashboard stayed fixed at 1:40 the entire trip. Not blinking, not frozen, the seconds moving, but the minutes never changing. We pulled up to the house. This time he didn't move at all. No reaching for the door, no leaning forward, just staring at the front porch. I followed his gaze. The curtains were open slightly tonight. Inside, the faint glow of a television lit the living room. A couple walked past the window, older than him, talking casually like any normal night at home. His voice softened. "That's them." He didn't get out. After almost a minute, the porch light turned on anyway. He inhaled slowly and finally opened the door. I watched him walk up the driveway again. This time he knocked. The door opened. I couldn't hear words, but I saw the woman freeze, hand still on the knob. The man stepped behind her, confused. They both stared at him like they didn't understand what they were seeing. He spoke calmly, a short sentence, and I saw the woman's face drain of color before the door shut abruptly. He stood there for several seconds after it closed, then walked back to the taxi and got in again. "They remember now," he said quietly. I didn't ask anything else. Halfway to the next address, I noticed the seat behind me, in the mirror, was empty. I pulled over. The back door was closed, but he was gone. My meter still running, and from the radio, not dispatch, came a recorded voice repeating my pickup confirmation from 10 minutes earlier. In my own voice, I checked the back seat twice. Nothing. No door opening sound. No movement I could have missed. The locks were still engaged from the front control panel, and the child safety locks meant the rear doors couldn't be opened from inside anyway. Yet the indentation on the seat cushion slowly rose as if weight had just lifted off it. My meter kept counting time. I ended the ride manually, and the screen froze for a second before displaying a receipt. Pick up 1:40 a.m. Drop off 1:40 a.m. Total duration 00. I drove home early that night. The next day, curiosity got the better of me, and I looked up the address he'd given. Public records, nothing complicated. The house belonged to a couple in their late 60s. Same last name as the passenger. One child listed on older census data. Male, deceased. Date, 11 years earlier. Traffic collision, late night, returning home. The report location sat 2 blocks from the corner where I picked him up every night. I didn't work that evening. I turned the app off and stayed home, telling myself I was done with whatever routine I'd accidentally fallen into. At 1:40 a.m., my parked taxi outside started. Engine turned over once. Headlights came on. I ran outside barefoot, keys still in my hand upstairs, and watched the driver door unlock by itself. The interior light flicked on briefly, like someone had entered. The car idled, waiting. I didn't get in. After about 30 seconds, the engine shut off and the doors locked again. I went back inside and didn't sleep. The following night, I worked again, telling myself I needed proof it would stop. I avoided the street entirely and picked up rides across town. At 1:40, my phone vibrated. A scheduled pickup accepted automatically. No request tone, no passenger name, just coordinates, the same corner. I hesitated, then drove there. He was standing beside my taxi before I even turned onto the block. He got in and closed the door softly. "I tried without you," he said. "It only works if you arrive." I drove toward the house again, slower this time. When we pulled up, the porch light was already on, and both of his parents stood outside, waiting like they knew exactly when he would be there. He didn't get out. He looked at me through the mirror for the first time. "I needed a ride home." I asked quietly, "Are you home now?" He watched them for a long moment, then shook his head slightly. "No, you are." The meter stopped on its own. The dashboard clock changed to 1:41. For the first time since I'd met him. When I looked back, the seat was empty again. I never saw him at the corner after that night, but sometimes when I end a shift and park outside my house, the back door unlocks once before I turn the car off, like someone finishing a trip. Story 3. The hotel camera kept showing a guest who never checked in. I worked night desk at a small highway hotel, the kind travelers use once and never remember. After midnight, it was usually just paperwork, security monitors, and the occasional late arrival from the interstate. You learn the building's rhythm fast. ice machine at 12:20, elevator cycling at 1:05, laundry finishing at 2:30. So when the camera showed someone standing at the end of the third floor hallway at 3:12 a.m., I noticed. Immediately, he wasn't moving, just standing near room 318 facing the door. I assumed a guest locked out of their room, so I checked the booking system. Room 318, vacant, no reservation, no key issued. I grabbed a master key and went upstairs. The hallway was empty. I checked both directions twice before unlocking 318, just in case someone had gone inside somehow. The room was untouched, perfectly reset from housekeeping earlier that afternoon. I went back downstairs and watched the monitor again. He was there, same spot, same posture, facing the door. I stared for a long moment before realizing the timestamp on the camera feed was current, not a playback glitch. I went upstairs again, faster this time, empty, back downstairs. There he stood again on the screen. After the third trip, I called my manager thinking the system looped old footage somehow. While waiting for him to answer, the elevator camera activated. The man stepped inside. I watched him ride down to the lobby. The elevator dinged behind me. I turned around. No one got off. But on the monitor, he walked straight toward the front desk and stopped inches from where I was standing, looking directly into the camera. His mouth moved slowly. No audio came through the system, but I could read the words clearly. "You gave me this room before." Stayed behind the desk, not frozen, just unsure what action made sense when the person existed only on one side of the monitors. The lobby around me was empty, doors locked, night lights humming, the faint smell of coffee from the pot I'd brewed hours earlier. On the screen, he leaned slightly closer to the camera, like he expected me to recognize him. I checked the date stamp on the recording system, correct. Then I rewound 10 seconds and played it again. The hallway camera still showed him upstairs at the same moment, 2 places at once. My manager finally answered, half asleep, and I tried explaining without sounding ridiculous. He suggested a stuck frame mixed with live feed. The system was old, and told me to restart the recording unit in the back office. I didn't want to turn my back to the monitors, but I did it anyway. The reboot took about 30 seconds. When the screens came back online, every camera looked normal. Empty halls, empty lobby. I exhaled. Then the elevator chimed again. I looked up. The doors opened slowly, and no one stepped out. But on the lobby monitor, he walked past me toward the hallway leading to the office. I turned just as the office door clicked shut on its own. I opened it immediately. The small room was empty except for the computer rack, and a key card sitting on the desk I didn't remember placing there. Room 318, printed timestamp on the card, 3:12 a.m. I hadn't issued it. Our system logs every key creation automatically. I pulled up the activity screen. One entry added itself as I watched. Issued by night clerk. My employee ID from a date 6 years earlier, before I worked here. The printer behind me activated. A registration form slid out. Guest name filled in mutely. The same man's. Under notes, one line typed itself slowly across the page. Requested same room again. The elevator chimed upstairs, and the camera showed room 318's door opening from the inside. I didn't go up right away. I watched the monitor first. The door to 318 stayed open, the interior lights off. Hallway lights spilling just far enough inside to show the edge of the bed and the dresser. No movement, but the room didn't look empty anymore. The air inside seemed darker than the hallway, like depth where there shouldn't be any. The elevator screen flickered. He stood inside it again, not entering, already there, facing forward as the car rose to the 3rd floor. The doors opened and he stepped out, walked directly into the room. The door closed behind him. At the desk, the phone rang. Not the outside line, the internal extension. Room 318. I let it ring once before picking up. Static at first, then breathing. Not strained, not panicked. Patient, the way someone waits for the person on the other end to realize who they're speaking to. "You checked me in last time," he said quietly. "You didn't come back." I forced myself to answer normally. "Sir, no one is registered in that room." A pause. "You wrote it down," he replied gently. "You said you'd remember." I opened the old storage cabinet behind the desk where we kept archived paperwork from before digital systems, mostly forgotten receipts and maintenance forms. I didn't know what I was looking for, just something to ground the moment. One folder near the back had fallen open. Inside were incident reports, dated years before I worked there. One described a guest found unresponsive in room 318 after repeatedly requesting a wake-up call that never came. The employee, signature at the bottom, my name, my handwriting. I felt the phone grow colder in my hand. "I've never worked here before last year," I said, more to myself than to him. "You stayed late that night too," he said softly. "You fell asleep." The hallway camera showed the door to 318 opening again. The room beyond wasn't dark now. Morning light filled it, bright daylight from a window facing a parking lot I knew only saw the highway. I heard movement upstairs, not from speakers, but faintly through the ceiling. Furniture shifting. I hung up and took the master key. The elevator ride felt longer than normal, though the indicator numbers changed correctly. When the doors opened, the hallway was silent but warmer than the floors below. Room 318 stood open. Inside looked different. Older furniture, older curtains, a style the hotel had replaced years ago, and someone lay on the bed, breathing slowly, asleep. Beside the bed sat a younger version of me in a staff uniform that hadn't existed for over a decade, head resting against the wall, asleep in a chair. The man in the bed turned slightly and looked toward me. "You came back this time," he said. Behind me, the elevator dinged again, the lobby calling me downstairs at the exact moment the report said the wake-up call should have been made. Story 4. I'm a police officer and the same missing person calls. Every year, the call came in on a night that was too quiet. That's usually when the worst ones happen. Not because quiet causes anything, but because you let your guard down. You stop expecting the radio to change your night, and then it does. Dispatch sent me to a small house at the edge of town for a welfare check. A neighbor reported a porch light that had been on for 3 days straight and a car still parked in the driveway. The neighbor said they hadn't seen the homeowner in almost a week. Yeah, routine. I'd cleared 100 calls like that in my career. Knock, announce, check windows, try to contact, leave a card, maybe force entry if there's a strong enough reason. Most times it's an elderly resident who fell or someone on vacations whose timer is stuck. The address wasn't familiar until I turned onto the street. The houses were older there, spaced far apart, yards overgrown in a way the rest of town had grown out of. The street light near the end flickered constantly, casting the same patch of pavement in alternating light and shadow. I remembered that street light. Everyone did. It never got fixed. When I pulled up, the porch light was on just like dispatch said, but what stood out more was the front door, slightly open, Not wide, not inviting, just cracked enough that the porch light spilled into the hall like the house was mid-breath. I parked and approached carefully, hand hovering near my belt. I called out police before stepping onto the porch. No response. The air smelled stale, like old carpet and something faintly metallic underneath. I nudged the door wider with the side of my boot. Inside, the house was dark except for the porch light and a lamp glowing dimly deeper in the hallway. A lamp that shouldn't be on if nobody's home. I stepped inside and announced again. My voice sounded swallowed by the walls, like the house absorbed sound instead of carrying it. No movement. The living room was tidy, almost stage. A blanket folded on the couch. A glass on the coffee table with a faint ring of dried water beneath it. The TV off but angled slightly, like someone had been watching and stepped away. I moved toward the hallway. Halfway down, I noticed a framed photo on the wall. A family picture, smiling faces, summer sunlight. The man in the photo looked familiar in that generic way most middle-aged men do, but the girl in the photo caught me. Because she had my eyes, not similar eyes, not could be. The exact shape, the same slight droop at the outer corner like a trait passed down. My stomach tightened. I reminded myself families share features and stress makes you see patterns where none exist. Then the radio crackled, not dispatch. A faint voice, low and close like someone speaking right beside my ear, said, "Don't go upstairs." I froze. The house didn't have a second floor. I stood still long enough that my own breathing sounded loud. The radio on my shoulder was silent again. No static, no dispatch, nothing. I tapped it once like that would reset whatever I'd heard, then spoke into it the way you do when you want to convince yourself you're in control. "Dispatch, Unit 14, I'm on scene. Door was unsecured, I'm making entry." Dispatch answered normally, unbothered. "Copy, Unit 14, advise." No mention of the warning, no sign the voice had been on the channel at all. I continued down the hallway anyway, sweeping my flashlight in slow arcs. The lamp at the end glowed from a side. Table, warm yellow, the kind of light people leave on for comfort. It made the hallway feel narrower, older, like the house was leaning in. At the end of the hall were two doors, one to a bedroom, one to what looked like a small office. Both were closed. Between them, a set of stairs led upward. I stopped. I stared at them long enough that my flashlight beam shook slightly. The address file said single story. The exterior looked like single story. But there they were, carpeted stairs, scuffed at the edges as if used daily. My first thought was that I'd walked into the wrong house. I backed up quickly, checked the hallway, the front door, the living room layout. Everything matched what I'd seen entering. Same photos, same furniture. I returned to the stairs. Up close, the carpet on the steps looked older than the hallway carpet. A different shade, a different wear pattern. Like the stairs had existed longer than the rest of the house, or maybe like someone had replaced the hall, but never the steps. I remembered the voice again. "Don't go upstairs." I should have listened, or at least waited for backup. But that's not how you think during a call you believe is routine. You tell yourself the fear is irrational and pushing through it is the job. I climbed. The air changed after the third step, warmer and drier, carrying a faint smell of paper and dust. Halfway up, I noticed the wall beside the stairs was lined with shallow frames. School photos, certificates, little milestones, a girl aging year by year, same eyes again. The last photo was a graduation picture with a date printed at the bottom. It was dated next year. My pulse thudded hard enough that I felt it in my throat. The upstairs landing opened into a narrow hallway. The ceiling slanted slightly as if the space had been carved out of attic. On the left was a closed door with a child's name painted on it. On the right was another door, plain, slightly open. A faint sound came from inside that open door. Not talking, breathing, slow, steady, like someone asleep. I approached, announcing again, "Police department." No response. I pushed the door wider and stepped into a bedroom. The room was neat in the same staged way as the living room. Bed made, desk organized, books aligned. But the chair at the desk was pulled out as if someone had just stood up. On the bed lay a backpack, the kind teenagers use, worn straps, keychain dangling. It looked recently used. My flashlight beam caught a corner of paper sticking out. A missing person flyer folded and creased like it had been handled too many times. I set the beam on it and read the name, my surname, a photo of a girl about 17, same eyes, the date at the top, missing since today. My stomach dropped. I flipped it over with a gloved hand. At the bottom of the flyer, under "If you have any information," was a phone number I knew by heart because it was mine, my personal cell. The breathing behind me stopped. I turned fast, sweeping the light across the room. Nothing moved, but the closet door, half opened, shifted inward a fraction, like someone inside had leaned closer to listen. I backed toward the bedroom doorway, radio in one hand, flashlight in the other, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dispatch, Unit 14, I have..." My voice caught. "I have unusual circumstances, requesting another unit." Dispatch replied immediately, but the words came slightly delayed, like the signal had to travel farther than normal. "Unit 14, copy, additional unit en route." I kept the closet in my beam, silence. Then, from inside the closet, a voice spoke softly, not through the radio this time, but directly in the room. "You weren't supposed to come yet." The voice sounded like a girl trying to be brave. And then the floorboards behind me creaked, not upstairs settling, but the clear sound of a footstep entering the room from the hallway. I didn't move, because the footstep sounded exactly like mine. Same weight, same cadence. Someone walked in behind me and stopped close enough that I felt warmth at my back. A second, steadier voice, older, calm, familiar in a way that made my skin go cold, spoke near my ear. "Now you remember. Good." I didn't turn around. Every instinct told me to face whatever stood behind me, but the voice felt too close, too certain. If I turned and nothing was there, I'd doubt myself. If I turned and someone was there, I wasn't sure I wanted to see the face. Instead, I kept my flashlight fixed on the closet. "Who's in there?" I asked, forcing the words steady. The girl's voice answered immediately. "You told me not to come out until you came back." My grip tightened on the radio. "When?" A pause, then quietly, "Last time." The floorboard behind me creaked again, the weight shifting just slightly. I could almost picture someone standing where I'd just been seconds ago, mirroring my stance. The calm voice near my ear spoke again. "We always reach this part eventually." I spun around. The hallway behind me was empty. No one stood there, no shadow moving away, just the open doorway and the slanted ceiling beyond. I checked the stairs, clear. The voice had been close enough that I should have seen breath in the beam of my light, but the air showed nothing. Behind me, the closet door opened another inch. I turned back. Inside the closet stood a girl about 17, hugging her arms tight to herself like she'd been waiting a long time. She looked exhausted but not injured, eyes red from crying, posture stiff from standing too long in one place. She looked relieved to see me. "You took forever," she said softly. I stared at her, my mind trying to reconcile what I was seeing with the flyer still in my hand. "What's your name?" I asked. She hesitated. "You know it. I need you to say it." She gave it, the same name printed on the paper. My last name. I swallowed. "How long have you been here?" She looked past me toward the hallway like she was checking if someone else listened. "I came home from school. The door was open. You were already upstairs." My chest tightened. "I've never been here before tonight." She shook her head slowly, confusion replacing relief. "You said that last time too." My radio crackled. "Dispatch again," but the signal warped slightly, stretching words. "Unit 14, status." I keyed the mic. "I have a missing juvenile located. Repeat, located." Static swallowed half my sentence. Dispatch responded, but the reply overlapped itself like two transmissions playing at once. The girl stepped out of the closet carefully. "Don't answer that," she said suddenly. I paused. "Why?" "Because you never hear it right," she whispered. The hallway light flickered once. The lamp downstairs cut out and came back on a half-second later. She looked toward the stairs, tense. "He's almost here." "Who?" Her voice dropped. "The one who keeps bringing you." The air shifted, a pressure change, subtle but noticeable. And from downstairs came the unmistakable sound of the front door closing gently. I hadn't heard it open. Footsteps crossed the living room. Slow, measured, heading for the stairs. The girl grabbed my sleeve instinctively. "You always think you can fix it when you get upstairs," she said, voice trembling, "but you never remember leaving." The first step creaked, then the second. I realized something cold settle in my mind. Dispatch had sent me here tonight. But according to the flyer, she went missing today, which meant every time I'd stood here before, it hadn't been tonight. The footsteps reached halfway up the stairs, and from below, my own voice called up calmly, "Don't go in that room." The girl's grip tightened around my sleeve. "You hear it now," she whispered. "You never did before." I backed toward the bedroom doorway, keeping the flashlight aimed down the hall. The steps continued, slow, unhurried, exactly matching the pace I would have taken climbing them. Not chasing, just arriving. My radio crackled again, but the transmission overlapped itself. Dispatch repeating my unit number while another faint version of my voice spoke over it, from somewhere else in the house. "Unit 14, Unit 14, don't go upstairs yet." The second voice wasn't coming from the radio, it was coming from below us. I pulled the girl into the bedroom and closed the door gently, though the latch didn't click. The frame didn't quite line up anymore, like the house had shifted a fraction. I pushed a chair under the knob anyway. The steps reached the landing, stopped. Silence filled the hallway long enough that my ears rang. Then, the handle moved, not trying to force entry, just testing, the same way I had tested countless doors on calls. A professional habit, my habit. The girl stepped back toward the closet instinctively. "You usually open it," she said quietly. "Not this time." The handle lowered again and pressed against the chair. The pressure held for a moment, then released. Instead of forcing it, the steps moved away down the hall. I listened as they reached the staircase again and descended. My own voice drifted up faintly, speaking to an empty house. "No one here tonight." The girl exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding breath for years. I lowered the flashlight slightly. "Tell me everything you remember." She nodded, forcing herself to think. "I came home from school. The door was open. You were already here, standing in the living room. You said someone reported a light on." My pulse pounded. Exactly the call I'd received. "You told me to wait upstairs. While you checked the rest," she continued, "but every time you leave the room, it starts again." "What does?" She looked toward the floor. The day. The hallway clock, which I hadn't noticed before, ticked once, and then again, but the second hand moved backward. The air grew colder, the warm smell of the house fading into that stale metallic scent from when I first entered. From downstairs came the sound of the front door opening once more. The same careful motion. Another set of footsteps entered. I stepped to the bedroom window and pushed the curtain aside. My patrol car sat in the driveway, engine off, but through the windshield I saw someone in the driver's seat. Head bowed, hands on the wheel, waiting. The girl whispered behind me, voice small. "That's the version that leaves." I watched as the figure stepped out of the cruiser and walked toward the porch. Posture familiar, movements automatic. Me, the second version, reached the door and knocked once before entering. Behind me in the hallway, the stairs creaked again as the one downstairs began climbing. 2 arrivals, same moment. The girl's voice shook. "You always pick which one you follow." The handle rattled once more, and from the hallway, both voices spoke at the same time, one below, one above, identical tone. "Let's try again." For a moment I couldn't move. 2 sets of footsteps, one climbing toward the bedroom, one already somewhere downstairs, both moving with the same steady familiarity I'd carried through years of patrol. The sound overlapped just enough to feel wrong, like hearing your own recorded voice played a fraction of a second out of sync. The girl stepped closer, behind me. "You usually follow the one upstairs," she said. "That's why you never remember the driveway." I forced myself to breathe slowly. "What happens if I don't follow either?" She hesitated. "You never tried." The handle pressed again, harder this time, chair legs scraping slightly across the floor. At the same moment, the version downstairs called up in my voice, "Scene clear." My radio crackled, dispatch's voice stretched and distorted, confirming a welfare check complete. I understood then. One version of me always cleared the call. The other kept searching, and every time I chose the search, I stepped back from the door. The handle pushed again, then released when I didn't move to open it. The footsteps in the hall paused, uncertain for the first time. Downstairs, the front door opened again, the arriving version starting over, but I stayed in the bedroom. The girl watched me carefully. "You're changing it." The hallway clock ticked backward once, then forward. The air shifted warmer. The steps outside the bedroom retreated slowly down the hall, not erased, just leaving. The second set downstairs reached the landing, but didn't continue upward. Both sets moved away from the room at once. Silence settled, heavier than before. I opened the bedroom door cautiously. The hallway looked ordinary. No stretching perspective, no doubled shadows. The stairs led down to the living room exactly as they should. My patrol car in the driveway sat empty. I walked downstairs with her behind me. The front door stood closed but unlocked. The lamp glowed steady. The framed family photo on the wall showed the girl at different ages, and at the end, an empty space where a future photo should have been. My radio crackled clearly now. Unit 14, status check. I answered slowly. Juvenile located, safe. Dispatch acknowledged normally. The girl looked around the house, confused but relieved. It's quiet. Outside, the porch light flicked off as morning sunlight touched the street. I stepped out and looked back. The stairs inside no longer reached anywhere unexpected. Just a single floor, the records described. Weeks later, the missing person report stayed filed as resolved. No strange follow-ups, no repeated calls. But sometimes on late shifts, my radio clicks softly and a faint version of my voice begins to speak, stopping before words form, like a call that almost loops back but doesn't. And I always answer quickly, just in case the other version is still about to go upstairs. The house didn't stay empty after that night. For a while I expected another call, another neighbor noticing a light, another open door. But weeks passed quietly. The girl returned to school. Her parents replaced the broken porch bulb and fixed the loose latch. On paper, it ended the way cases are supposed to end. But paperwork never captures the parts that stay with you. The first time the radio clicked again, I was on a completely different street across town. Midnight traffic stop, nothing unusual. As I walked back to my cruiser, the shoulder mic whispered faintly, "Not," through the channel just beneath it. The same calm tone I'd heard upstairs. "Don't go upstairs." I checked the screen. No transmission. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I drove past the house once at the end of my shift. Not officially, just habit I couldn't shake. The place looked normal in daylight. Quiet yard, curtains open. For a moment, I wondered if the entire night had been stress layered over coincidence. Then I noticed something in the upstairs window. The hallway wall where the stairs had been, where they shouldn't have been, held a framed photo I didn't remember seeing before. I slowed the cruiser, squinting through the glass. It showed the girl standing outside the house with her parents, and a fourth person beside them. My uniform, my face. Not a candid moment, posed like I belonged there. I parked and walked up to the door before I fully decided to. The father answered, confused but polite, recognizing me from that night. I asked, casually, if they'd added new photos. He looked over his shoulder. "No, those have been up since we moved in." I didn't push further. Back in the car, my radio popped softly. A half-started transmission that died before dispatch spoke. I waited, thumb hovering over the mic, but nothing followed. From then on, it happened occasionally, always quiet, always just before a call that felt routine but turned strange. A door found open, a report slightly mismatched, a detail I might have missed before. Never another loop. Months later, I ran into the girl at a grocery store. She recognized me immediately and smiled. The first relaxed expression I'd seen from her. We talked briefly. She remembered being found upstairs, remembered me asking her to stay in the room, but she didn't remember hearing my voice in the hallway. She didn't remember the other footsteps. "Just you," she said. I nodded and let it go. That night, as I finished my shift, the radio clicked once more, clearer than ever, and my own voice whispered through before fading. "Good call." The channel stayed silent afterward. I never returned to that house again, and the address never came across dispatch a second time. But sometimes when I reach a staircase on a late call, I pause a moment longer than needed, making sure I'm the one deciding to go up.